Morning, everybody. Welcome to the Kerfuffle Podcast on this Sunday in lockdown, hopefully for one of the last lockdown weekends. How are you, David? You okay?
Good morning, Simon. This is one of the last times we actually have you on a podcast before you go AWOL after Boris lets everybody out.
That's very, very true, but only when it's socially and medically acceptable, of course.
We're going to listen to the science on that one.
I always do. It's data, not... oh, no, I forgot what the saying is now. Anyway, enough of that.
Where to start? Well, it's a bit of an odd Sunday anyway, because the estate agent podcast has not been on this morning as usual at 9 a.m. and unfortunately there's a very good reason for that, and that is going to the very sad death of Stephen Brown's wife last week, and you can see from the absolute outpouring of industry support and kind words that you see, and the images that are changing all over the industry in terms of support for Stephen, the sort of things that people are saying. But if you don't mind, Simon, in a rare moment of eloquence, I actually think that you probably put it best at the end of your last webinar. So I'm just going to replay that if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course, yeah. That's good. Well, I just want to say just a little bit before we leave. Spencer, as I said, thank you very much, had to leave. It's a really sad day, unfortunately. He's had to pop off to go to the Zoom funeral, unfortunately, of Sam Brown. Many of you out there in estate agency world will know Stephen Brown exceedingly well. If you haven't worked with him directly in a training capacity, you'll certainly see him over the airwaves and on the fantastic Estate Agency podcast. Unfortunately, his wife has been ill for some time now, and unfortunately just passed away. The word legend is often overused in this industry, but it's absolutely true of Stephen. He goes out of his way to help out on a number, just on a personal level. The amount of times, classically, when I do something that I let everybody know about it, Stephen's not one of those people, and he's going to be going through obviously a particularly hard time. So, Stephen, from everyone here, and the industry, I'm sure, as a whole, we're all thinking of you, and best love and thoughts. I don't know how we can, do anything at this time, but one thing I would say is that Stephen has been running the fantastic Computers for Schools initiative, which has been going down just incredibly well here. And if you can go to this, I'll put the link out on the across all the social here. I think they're within touching distance of the 55,000 target. It's a brilliant scheme anyway, but just in terms of whatever you can give to that, just to show Stephen we're thinking about him at this time, I think that'd be lovely for everybody to do. So once more, Stephen, thanks for everything you do in this industry, and once again, thoughts are with you and yours, basically. So
that was Simon Whale earlier this week. That was actually very, very lovely, Simon.
Well, it's heartfelt. Yeah, it is. I said it before. It's there's a lot of people. It's scholar and gent is overused. Look, I didn't have the fortune to know his wife, but I know him well, and I know him and what he does and what he stands for. And I think that's a rare commodity these days, isn't it? And just as a few shout outs, again, I think he's almost within touching distance of that 55,000. So the smallest amount would happen. There was some genuinely people like Spencer on Friday just jumping in again. He's already been doing it, but he jumped in again and helped out. And I just think it'd be a lovely way of showing the time, energy. And I know Jerry and Chris are rallying together, and I think that's a sign of how strongly people feel about him, don't they? So yeah, just once again, obviously, yeah, everyone thinking about you.
Yeah, no, massive support for the person that has probably overall given the most support to people in the industry over the years. He's always been there for everybody. So he is everybody's best mate.
It's a horrible time, and just to shout out to Carl as well. Carl Mackerath lost his mother this week. Carl's really unusual in that he's not an agent, but he is a member of our Kerfuffle property group. So we've got a wide audience here, but anyway, he kindly jumps in. He's our resident DJ, and I just want to say we're thinking here as well, and indeed everyone, of course, because people are suffering at the moment and losing their own kith and kin at the moment, aren't they? So horrible times, but hopefully we'll come through it together.
We will, and we are here for everybody, and anybody can pick up the phone and talk if they need to. Andy Overman was there before, just saying hello. Right, Simon, what have you for us?
Was that like an Alan Partridge change of pace there you were just doing in the way that only the Kerfuffle Podcast can do?
We go back into it again, and I'll say something like, I never actually got to meet Sam Brown, unfortunately, but I do know that because she was very often present in the background of some of the telephone conversations that I had with Stephen over the years. But I do know she was a very humorous woman, and she gave Stephen an awful amount of support as well. And I think it's really sort of testament to Stephen's devotion as well to her, that this thing had not been going on for a short amount of time. This is many years of looking after each other, and he never once let his demeanor slip. He never once was too down in the dumps to sort of deal with people kindly. And in fact, his positivity, particularly over the last sort of 3 or 4 months, and his drive and focus for this Computers for School effort just shows you that. Because just 4 days ago, when he was in the middle of living hell, he was texting me to find out whether the computers that he'd ordered for us had arrived. That's the kind of guy that he was.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that he just never, ever gave up with that sort of stuff and the positivity. So that's what I take from it. How about that? Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
It is. No, it is. It's lovely. And I think what's interesting, isn't it? There's comments are pouring in now, but there's 1,000,001 of those different conversations, aren't there, going on? And that shows when I suppose that shows when you matter, when you get those lovely little vignette stories.
I've never heard the word vignette.
For out of me or in general?
Well, no, in general, it sounds like the sort of kind of stuff that I'd be pouring on a salad.
You think I just went to school and got a boarding school and just got abused, didn't you? But no, I learned things. David.
You were brought up correctly.
I was, yes, correctly, yeah, S&M style. But anyway, so what's been happening? What's been happening in agency world this week, my friends?
Oh, there's just so much going on. I don't even know what to choose from. You sent me a list of stories earlier today. And
don't ruin the magic. People think we just sort of go on and there. Don't make them realise there's any preparation 10 minutes before the show.
Simon generally texts me when I'm on the loo. He's on the loo. It's the only time we've got to talk to each other. And we plan out these shows. No, but really this week it's been rich pickings in terms of what's been going on in the news, because you've got. What I would say is you've got a collection of stories that are just teasers, because I think the real truth is yet to come out over the next couple of weeks. So there's lots going on. We're going to talk about Property Mark and that shit show, Andy Overman.
There you go. As if by magic. I pop open the story for you. So your favorite discussion point, even before it became vaguely topical, is Property Mark. So the first thing is, we're not going to hear jack shit, are we? Because there's obviously 1,000,001 NDAs, legal clauses, non-disclosure, and all that going on. So it's all supposition, but that's not going to let us stop.
Well, I think that is the point, and I have to say that I think this is the key to all good PR. Is that sometimes you have to go out of your way to be to overshare information in the way that only Simon Whale can on social media. But I think if you are to get to air your washing in public and that everybody knows what's going on, whether that be in sort of local government or politics at the highest level, or even in organizations that are meant to represent an entire industry. Why don't they just get it out in public?
Yeah,
Because all they're doing now by this cloak and dagger stuff is letting people draw their own conclusions. We've got the RICS being investigated for alleged accounting irregularities. There's been talk of the same sort of happening at Property Mark, allegedly. And all you're going to end up with, lads and lasses, is people asking this question that some generic Facebook user has asked this morning: is Property Mark and NAEA even relevant anymore? Does anyone care? And if the answer to that is a resounding no.
Was that a generic Facebook user? Is that Tim Balkin?
I think it's John Paul.
Well, his march for glory starts here, doesn't it?
But there's a lot of it's almost like they've been to the sort of right move school of PR this week, that they're not saying anything of substance. And we all know that 2 resignations very quickly and in short succession is something that with little explanation, it leaves it to us, the members of the public, to try and work out what it is that's going on behind the scenes at the shit show that is likely to be put in charge of regulating our industry. It absolutely it fills me with fear, horror that might be the case.
Is it recoverable, Dave? Well, first of all, what do you think's gone on there? I mean, again, putting all of the allegedlys and stuff, what is actually going on in your mind as an independent conspiracy theorist? Tell me what you think's going on.
I honestly, and this is an open invitation to any of our ARLA, NEA, Property Mark, whatever you called this week, members, and I know there are some board members, I think, that sometimes watch our show. I think Zoe Bywater, she's obviously very much involved with them, and I think John Paul is as well. So if you're there and you want to come on and talk about it, just let us know that you're there and I'll send you a link. But
I'll tell you what's really weird, though, David, isn't it? We know Zoe and John Paul, pretty well, and they are 2 of the straightest talking people we know, and it seems completely out of tune with what you see happening in the rest of the organisation, don't you think? Is this genuinely then a changing of is this the new guard? Is there an acceptance that this is what has to happen anyway, or have they managed to get in on the inside? And it's
you're a big football man, aren't you? So you were before you started supporting Liverpool. But the analogy is this: if you want to have a look at, do you remember at the beginning when Ole joined Manchester United and it suddenly turned their success and they were winning every game and he was the next best thing. He was well and truly the Messiah, wasn't he, for Manchester United at that time? And I think recently Property Mark decided that they were going to have a bit of a shake-up, weren't they? And they have made some new appointments, and we were all promised that was the beginning of bigger and better things. And I think to get this far in, which isn't very far at all, and then pull the plug on 2 big names, to me, something behind the scenes is extremely wrong. And I don't know what that is. I don't know whether it's Roper. I don't know whether it's something to do with recent tensions between government and the industry in terms of what's going on with stamp duty. Who knows? I'd love to think that they were that essential.
Will we find out? Do you think, is this going to be one of those things that just is buried, or do you think because it needs a piercing of the boil, doesn't it? Is what you were talking about before. It needs somebody to go, look, this is as much as you can do, and I appreciate legally that's easy for us to say on this show, but it needs to happen, otherwise it's just going to keep coming up, and people need, if it's an industry body, they need complete faith and belief in that body, don't they?
Well, we need more than that. We need complete transparency, and I've heard people like Chris Watkins this week standing up for Property Mark and saying, look, there are very good reasons for this. You may not hear a lot from Property Mark in terms of the work that they are doing with government. However, David Cox at the time did a lot, and you'll never know what went on because all of it has to be kept secret. I think that's your mistake, guys. It doesn't have to be kept secret. You choose to keep it secret and to toe the line with government, that you're one of them, effectively. You're not one of them. You're one of us. Yeah. And you represent us. And you are one of us. And you're helping them to communicate with us because they need us as much as we need them. And all of those stamp duty receipts that we're talking about, that's what it's all about.
Just dare I say it, it doesn't look like Shelter ever give a flying fuck, do they? And they just get on with it.
What do you expect? Shelter to release a statement because Tim Balkan's become homeless recently? No, they don't care about this side of things. But secrets, as Christian Byfield says, secrets are the problem. I think if we are more open, and if they, as an industry body that is owned by that industry, they owe a duty of care to its members to be transparent. And too many of these big organizations have a little echo chamber at the top in their executive. And it doesn't matter how efficient their board is just below them, it needs to get out into public. We need to see when people are being incompetent. We need to see when government is failing us.
Yeah, Knighty has that phrase, doesn't he? He uses very, making the invisible visible, and that's what it's about, isn't it? Talk about the good work and everything else there. So,
Andy Overman, itching to get on the show today. Hi, Andy. We have as much chance of finding out about this as we do about where the billions went on high-end contracts during the peak season of COVID.
You're absolutely wrong there, Andy. We know exactly where they went, just no one is a toss. No one does anything. But you keep voting for them, that's fine.
What do we have here? Facebook user, I think one problem is there's no other voice being heard by the government. The government's view, I know, as I spoke to the department, is that the industry is united behind Property Mark. They were surprised when I said that views were very mixed. Well, there you go. I genuinely believe that member or no member, and I've always said this, even though I'm not a member of Property Mark, I would love to throw my weight and support behind it if I thought that what it was doing is correct and it really was truly an advocate for our industry, but openly and vocally. I don't like all this cloak and dagger stuff and that whole, you'll never know how much was done for so many behind the scenes. Yeah. I don't think, if we never hear about it, it never happened.
It didn't happen, did it? And speaking of things that didn't happen, secrets of the problem, you'd better hope so, Christian, because if I show some of the photos on here, you're in trouble, my friend. Secrets are needed sometimes.
So I think that's kind of taken care of Property Mark, but genuinely, if there's anybody out there that can provide any information that won't legally compromise them, and they feel that they want to either stand up for Property Mark or give their side of the tale, or even anonymously, what we can do is we can sort of blur out your face and we'll put up one of those voices.
We did that, like one of the old IRA statements.
The trouble with Property Mark is that someone's taken 50 grand and no one knows where it is.
Anyway.
That kind of thing. We could do that kind of, allegedly, we could do that kind of thing. But if the trouble is that certain of the people that I want to hear talk about Property Mark have got distinct features to their dialect. So, for instance, if you get John Paul on, if we change his voice, he's still going to come out with all that Geordie stuff, isn't he?
Yes, of course he is. Yes.
Away, Property Mark,
We're not going back to what's it, Accents Week at Comedy School, are we?
Week five. Okay, let's move on then.
Okay. Shall we go to, there was a couple of stories I saw out this week. Let's start with the first one from our friend, Mr. John Hanford. So where have we got him here? Here we are. It was quite contentious, I think, because John, on the face of it, obviously, he's on the board at Fine and Country, ostensibly a organisation that still very strongly, obviously, has high street locations and everything else. And he made, which I think to most people was not exactly a a startling, or indeed that disruptive disclosure, was it, that actually the importance of offices is becoming less important. But he got a bit of flack from it, and I think it was quite. I don't know. Are just people getting too overreactive towards this sort of thing? I mean, when you read a story like that, what do you take from it?
Well, I take a couple of things. One of the things that I take is that, bearing in mind, we've all spent not the property industry, actually. We've been very lucky with that, but most of the country have spent a great deal of time working from home.
Yeah.
I think what we all appreciate is, although some of it is amazing, so the ability to go for a poo at 10 o'clock in the morning in your own toilet is lovely between appointments. However, there are challenges. You've got kids, you've got people turning up at the door, you've got all sorts of pressures. And I think that most of us are getting fed up now of this home working thing, and we're actually itching for a little bit of social contact. So estate agents have had some of that because their offices have been open, although it's a very weird version of it that we're doing. It's still carrying on. So you're still getting that human interaction. But I would imagine that overall people are getting a little bit sort of fed up with the home working thing, and we could all do with a little work holiday from each other. And I think that's probably really important. In terms of high street locations as regards agents, well, it's interesting that Jonathan's the one giving that opinion, because I mean, I don't know because I've not checked it, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but his fine and country model will probably work on, generally speaking, low volume but very high end sales. So in terms of his commission,
$500,000, aren't they? If I remember rightly.
I would imagine so. So I think that he probably, in the small village, rural locations, that, as you can see here, Christian says, argue branches are needed small village locations. Cities, it's a lot of money for a little true value. But what's interesting is, I think an agency like Jonathan, where they're so specialist and they don't have to do that much volume, I think really, in terms of keeping your brand presence out there, maybe that high street location isn't what you need, because you're not dealing with that. You're not trying to grab the attention of every member of the public that walks past. You only need 1 in 10 or something like that. So maybe
I think it's more than that, though. If you remember when we spoke to him, of course, when in his days at with Sean Newman and Newman's, they were one of the first companies to have that kind of associate model, the individual model from that Sean had seen in the States and brought over seemingly very successfully over here as well. And I didn't see it as quite the sort of eye opener that it could be, because of course I think Fine and Country are having that associate model as well, aren't they, to tap into it. So to me, it just seemed like we're actually keeping up with the times as much as anything. But it was quite interesting. But what I did take from it was just actually on the back of it, you must see, anyone who's on Facebook must know this already, is that if I go in here, it's just talking about the other story in here, which talks about EXP, Adam Day's lot. Those numbers have absolutely exploded, haven't they? In terms, I mean, he talks more than 150. It feels like every other person on Facebook who you connect with is actually, is an EXP agent. And it ties in with another story I haven't got the link to, unfortunately. But Charlie Landin from Best Agent made the point that nearly 900 estate agency offices have closed over the past 6 months, or 4% of the UK's 22,270 branches. Now, is it simply just a case that these agents are coming out of traditional agency, and finding their own route? Because famously, they keep, I think, is it about 70% of the commission of any sale, don't they?
I think maybe we might start to look at this as a bit of a COVID era symptom as well, because what we're not talking about as an industry is that there have been some jobs that have gone. There were some tensions that were there before COVID.
Yeah.
That the beginning of part of COVID managed to break for some companies, and they took a very difficult decision, but justified at the time, in terms of what we didn't know. So what we didn't know was we were going to have a market to come back to in May. What we didn't know was that May to August would be as good as better than any other year, and would make up for the slack that you didn't put in between sort of March and May. But nobody could have planned that. But I actually think there were a few faces and a few bigger names actually that got thrown back out to the employment pile, because when you start to look at who you're going to let go in your big companies at a time where you're not likely to be agreeing sales, you're going to let the more highly paid people go first. So what you found is that you've got maybe a bit of a consolidation at the top with some people going. So I think there's more people that now are at this crossroads where I'd imagine walking into another job's not very easy, but starting up on your own with a little bit of cash in your pocket and the ability to work from home anyway, you can do that now because everybody's doing it. It's no longer weird. You don't worry about what you have to sell to a client because the client knows that's what you have to do. So maybe this is the perfect time to start your own business. Andy Overman, perfect example, not necessarily your classic self-employed model, but it's somebody whose situation over COVID broke perhaps a tension that may have been there before.
Yeah. So basically what you're saying is that almost this lockdown and around the pandemic has enabled that as just being a kosher way of doing business, and the public won't know any different.
Yeah, I think to the public are extremely, on one hand, they're unforgiving, because if you make a really big mistake, that's it, you've had it. But generally speaking, as to where you trade from and whether you're traditional, whether you're, maybe slightly different, I think they're willing to roll with it. I don't think they care that you haven't got an office that you can walk into necessarily.
It's still a relationship game, isn't it? And so in that respect, the person that you do business with, it still matters, doesn't it? It is the overriding connector, if you like, for that relationship.
What I do think is that, when I go out to valuations, I'm very often asked by vendors, do I need a for sale board? Because I'm not sure I want a for sale board outside. And I always say the same thing, that, if you want to send a message to the world that you are selling houses or you're selling your house, a for sale board is the crudest method of doing that. But having a shop front presence on a high street is also the equivalent of advertising very openly to the public. This is what I do. Come and get me. And it's effectively, sometimes it can just be an expensive billboard, but it's there. And I think for the majority of us, it works.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's so. Do you think then, when we see it bounce back as we all open up and everything else, will a lot of these people naturally go back to traditional agency, or do you think that? I mean, because it's just so adaptable, this industry. I mean, Charlie's stats are interesting, but I guarantee that there won't be, if you like, less people in the industry because they will have just spidered into different places.
Yeah. The thing about this industry is people joining it all the time, because it's one of those industries that you can join with just the shirt on your back if you've got it. If you've got a driving license and you're willing to do a few viewings here and there, then you'll always find somewhere that will give you your first chance. So I think actually we as quickly as we lose people, we do start to replenish them. It's whether or not we'll see some of these people join a self-employed model. It doesn't work, it fizzles out, and then we don't hear from them again. They decide to go and do something else completely. Who knows?
Yeah, cool. Well, we've got Tom obviously saying my stance would be a physical presence is needed within a 20-minute drive of where the agency is operating, but do not necessarily need a shop. We've got Andy. He's laying in a few punches. Some of those companies are really suffering now and appear to be doing poor figures. Yes, but Andy, in the world of prop tech, that's famously called pre-revenue. What else have we got here? We've got, again, what was it? Christian just made the point. Branches needed in small village locations. In cities, there's lots of money for little true value. Oh, sorry. Were you just showing something?
No, I wasn't showing you anything. Michael Nettleton, what's he saying? Only 2 reasons why you didn't get the instruction. They either didn't call you, or they did call you in and thought someone else was better.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Cool. Okay. So what else have you seen then this week? Did you see the news about Chesterton's going carbon neutral in the pantheon of things that go on? And I'm a liberal lefty, so to me, I thought that was quite important. Does anybody care? I mean, there obviously is a part of the public that do, but when they see companies doing that, is that just greenwashing, as they call it?
I have to say this is to me, being completely cynical, this is greenwashing. I'm not, and like with charity washing, and I've said this with Jerry Lyons when we were talking about what Boomin did, when they were setting up that charity. Do as much charity washing and much greenwashing as you like. It's virtue signaling at its highest level, but if it does some social good at the same time, do it. I don't care.
Yeah.
But I think that the members of the public are not necessarily fooled by it. But we all shop. We try and shop with people that act responsibly as far as the environment's concerned. If you had the choice between two products, they were both exactly the same.
Yeah, I mean, genuinely, if I was down in that there London, David, as we call it, and it was famously everyone's trying to be a purple cow and stand out from the crowd. You've had your right move, best price guide, and all the rest of it. And actually, all I remember at the end of the day is, you know what? Actually, Chestertons are doing the right thing by people. It would be enough for me, and I appreciate it. I am in a very small Venn diagram, as I am in many things in life.
No, but I wonder where this comes into play. So where do you make the client aware of it? When you're out on a valuation, are you going to sit in their living room and go, "Oh, by the way, we're completely carbon neutral"? Is it going to go onto an Akaboom slide at some point? It's interesting information, and it is lovely marketing as well. It is. You can't go wrong with it.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Can we take you to the story of the week?
Go for it.
Okay, let me see if I can just share this little baby again. So this is important, obviously, in a week that we've seen all this massively important industry information. We weren't hacked, explains a state agency after shop windows displays porn. Did you see this? I mean, this is...
Yeah. I saw that, and I thought... Yeah, this is very much belongs in the and in other news section.
Yeah, I should have left it till last. I couldn't. I was too excited. Probably me that did the hack. What I liked was they were but pains to stress that look, none of the back office systems have been hacked. All that's happened is that someone stood by the window, and I imagine it's via Bluetooth or NFC technology. They managed to hack in, and obviously, I don't know what it was. Don't know whether it was Pornhub or RedTube, or I could keep going on. But it was obviously, yes, it was left on the screen, and they've had to make an apology to the local community.
And do you know what? Maybe this is actually connected to the previous story. And this is the true reason why Jonathan Hanford doesn't think you need a shop window, because he's got the ability to watch porn at home whenever he likes. It doesn't matter. The public are not going to see it.
But we've got to say we don't know that for sure, do we?
No, we don't know that for sure. It's allegedly.
Yes.
Allegedly. That's what goes on. So there was another one, though, that I think is slightly bigger a story. And was I going to share that? Let's see if I can share it. Share screen. And I'm going for this. Here we go. Can you see that? Panel debate about property social media trolling. So
it's clickbait.
It's complete clickbait. I want to ask you, did you pay for that, or were they happy to print it?
Do you know what? I didn't even submit it. It's like it was one of those weird stories. Like, oh, okay, that's nice. So I don't know whether that was Russell. There's a few quotes in there from Vanessa. Basically, everybody's doing the right job and talking about it.
As ever, the funniest thing and the most ironic thing about this fantastic thing, which is going to happen on Friday, where you have the most. Would you say they're the most odious of industry characters? And I mean that in a loving way, in terms of people trolling them online.
I think you mean the most trolled people. But as somebody famously said, Obviously, we got Russell on as well because he loves to. Essentially, he does it from within a place of power, doesn't he? His whole story on a weekly basis is basically just to lure people out with those very clickbait statements. But there's got to be a load of truth in it because, of course, they do get so responded to.
What's the most amazing thing is the trolling that actually went on this article about trolling, which is just the irony of it. Now, Robert May makes a really good comment. One of the people that you've got on that is going to be answering hopefully questions and also criticism from members of the public is Russell Quirk, who if there's somebody that fits that Marmite description, it's Russell, isn't it? He gets some people's backs up, the rest of us look on with a mixture of shock and admiration sometimes of what he can get away with. But he pens a load of different opinion articles for Property Industry Eye, and Robert makes the really good point here that some of what he writes is actually trolling. And what he's saying is perhaps you can examine the gossamer thin line between anonymous trolling and vexatious site-sponsored clickbait. How about that? That's beautiful.
Vexatious, and what was my phrase earlier? What was the one you said I'd invented? I can't even remember now.
Vignette.
Yeah, it's all the V's, funny enough. And I do think that's a real point. The other thing people don't know about Russell is that, they might know, is he's on talk radio as well, which is talk radio is one of the most contentious, obviously, places ever in terms of it really does it's almost approved trolling, isn't it, of many different things. So he had to be on the show. Vanessa as well, I don't think we want to go there, but she was famously in the news a while back as well for being really having some poisonous attacks on her from an individual, and finding that very difficult. And I know that it's one of the main reasons why a lot of businesses, certainly in the early days, just didn't want to go near social media because, of course, they are aware that they might get a few thousand reads of the story, but because they'll get 2 or 3 bad comments, it's just they feel like it's not worth their time. And that's one of the aspects. Do you literally just have to? Famously, the whale has the thickest skin on the planet. Do you just have to grow a thick skin, as Mr. Watkins himself also says? Or importantly, that's when you're actually noticed? Or is there anything that can be done about it?
I think if you look at shame, which is one of the feelings that people sometimes feel if they're humiliated in public, but if you look at how that evolves, initially you feel very ashamed of yourself and you sort of retract. But if you keep putting yourself, if you're the kind of personality that has to keep putting yourself out there, you then have to learn to roll with the punches and to sort of go with it. And more than that, I would actually say that they actually start to get a little bit of a kick off other people sniping at them.
It's a very bizarre human emotion, that, isn't it? For getting that sign of what do they call it? Utils in economics, pleasure from that kind of stuff. I don't get it. But anyway,
one of the comments on that, if I can just find it, was just so beautifully troll-like. So Vanessa Warwick had given this massive diatribe there about what she thinks is the fine line between trolling and defamation, which is an interesting discussion in its own. But then we have a best and final 51. Sorry, Vanessa Warwick, no trolling meant, but I had to Google who you were.
It's like the ultimate smackdown, isn't it? And so, basically what we're saying, I think it's this Wednesday is 11 o'clock. Turn up, troll away. That'll be the final irony of it.
Is it Wednesday or is it Friday?
No, I think it's Wednesday. I will check just to be, again, famously not a detail person. I tell you, one of the things that if anyone's got any questions for that, by the way, that we want to discuss, please do drop us a line with that in the normal places, TikTok, Tinder, wherever you can get an SLA from me. But I'm interested as well. Of course, one of the key things I'm going to say is the age of anonymization dead for social media, or should it be? famously on Twitter and everything else, the ability to say whatever you want from the safety of your keyboard. Have we grown up enough in terms of social media now that if you're going to say something, you need to say it from a known profile?
Is it any different to the anonymous letters that were written to newspapers for a couple of 100 years before that, where it's just signed off Mr. W from Withington or something, rather than sort of giving your full name?
Again, it's the power and it's the scale of it is so much, and the immediacy, isn't it?
I think something does have to be done by the networks that publish this stuff. So we're talking about Facebook and Twitter and Instagram to a certain extent, and maybe even TikTok. Who knows? I think they've now understood they've got a responsibility to point out factual inaccuracies. They've got a responsibility to try and work out what is hate speech. I think it's a horrible. It's one of those things that once you start to pick at it, this whole tapestry then starts to fall apart, doesn't it? And it's very hard to put it back together again in a way that makes sense. So sometimes they can go over the top with censorship, but I do think these networks have got a responsibility to it. What I've noticed with Property Industry Eye is they are very selective as to what they like to censor themselves in terms of comments. So there are. Sorry.
That's interesting. What do you mean? What do you mean specifically?
Well, so I've seen some comments that were there then go missing, and you wouldn't necessarily think they're particularly, damaging or vexatious or anything like that, or libelous.
Yeah.
I just don't think it fits with sometimes some of the paid advertising.
Right.
So I actually wonder whether the Property Industry Eye or any of our press has a kind of moral line that they like to try and stick to, or literally is it just a media outlet for advertising and a bit of news at the same time?
I think they get unfairly hit with that. I think they're trying to find their way now, obviously, and everything else. But I don't see it as just pure propaganda in the way that some certainly are. Oh, sorry, I was just going to say.
Oh no, go on. Yeah.
I was just going to say, unsurprisingly, the Viking himself toughen up a bit and mute block the psychos. I haven't heard from you for a while, Christian. You'd given me a message there. I'm sorry, what was the one you wanted to show?
No, I think it was also from Christian that he does agree a degree of anonymity. That's another one of those words I can't say.
Anonymity.
Added to the list. People what don't like to give their true name out in public is a troll's best friend, but also gives people the ability to question, call out things without reprimand. I think that is also important. I think anonymous critique of people and things that put themselves out there is something that possibly should continue, as long as it's not particularly libelous or dangerous.
And look, the minute that it gets personal and is, verges on hate, you've never had the ability. People talk about free speech. It's not the ability to, to quote hate speech, is it? So that's the key thing. Tom McGee, the problem is that for Pi, in the same way that is for Twitter, most of their engagement comes from the anonymous trolls, and that's what drives their income. Now, that's a really interesting point, isn't it? So that's essentially the Daily Mail Online argument, isn't it?
Yeah.
Literally, isn't that just really depressing about the human psyche, if that is true?
Or maybe that's what's depressing about the property industry psyche, is that if you were to actually look at when Pi is published and most people read it. So it's published overnight. I think you've started to sort of retweet some of their stuff around midnight. But in actual fact, they send an email. Their email goes out to everybody. If you registered with them, their email goes out about 6:45 every morning.
Yeah.
And from 6:45 till about 8 o'clock, that's when the majority of these, hundreds of comments are left, all by very moody morning people out of our industry, who've had enough with life and the industry and the cynical and the bitter. I think we do it best.
It's like that. Is it Colonel Jessup in A Few Good Men? You want that type of hate speech. You need that hate speech. They're all desperate for a bit more, aren't they? Yeah, I think that's true. Can I just highlight again? It's a bit self-promoting, but Julian O'Dell as well has been doing an absolutely fantastic. I think it was Child's Health Week, if that makes sense. We're talking about obviously the mental state of a lot of children. Really, from a few friends, I've really started to understand now that their kids are actually really suffering and everything else. And Julian's come up with, I think, this fantastic idea, which we were obviously more than happy to endorse, given that it's sartorial. Hopefully, it's for good and it's a bit of a laugh as well. Where we've set up 4 different age groups, and we're asking people just to design Julian his new wacky shirts. I would show you the one that that Jez Lee of Agent OS was.
It was a triumph.
We're not beyond the watershed yet, so we won't be doing that.
All I can say is it's probably in line with the package that I received yesterday from Mr. Graham Wilson.
Yes,
and here it is in all its glory. It's still packaged up, and
so it's one of those punch bags, isn't it? It's one of the punch bags.
The lady that dropped it off from the courier service said to me that her husband and her were trying to figure out what it was, and they settled on that it was a massive sock. And I said, well, it certainly rhymes with that, madam.
You know what it is? You know those little posts that they force people to forward on, and if you don't, you get cursed. That's the power of that now, isn't it?
You know what? The only thing that's bothering me more than anything else, actually, out of this whole episode is that Graham Wilson now has my home address.
Yeah, he's going to
imagine him being able to stop by at any moment. Only me, just popping in.
And that's exactly how he does pop by as well. Robert, you've missed your section. Rewind 15 minutes. That's the power of a video these days. We've done that. But yes, good morning to see you, sir. So have a good look. We've been talking about you on the webinar a little bit earlier as well.
That comment is why Tom McGee is still relevant. The ultimate end game for this anonymous troll pathway is for Murray Lee to be revealed as Miles' Shipside.
I love the way your mind doesn't work. It is fantastic.
That's brilliant.
I know we're winding up. Can I also say a big thank you, because it's about me as well as so much of life is. Our friends at Akaboom, they've just made a point today. It's World Whale Day.
Yay!
Reminds us of the challenges faced in our oceans and indeed in the psyche of many estate agency people. Observed annually on the 3rd Sunday in February. We'd like to dedicate this to our very own Simon Whale. So, of course.
So, how will you be celebrating Whale Day?
Don't know. Pot noodle. Pot noodle pants.
Wow, really going to push the boat out this year, eh?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what you do in the sea. So great, mate. Well, I think we've got that's a nice roundup. As we said, everyone who has time, energy, inclination, please find those links before and give that Computers for Schools one last push to get it over the 55,000. Yeah, well done there. And so that'd be a lovely thing to do, I think.
Yeah, please give it one last push, because I do know some people are starting to run out of steam now because they think that going back to school is inevitable. I think what's inevitable is that we are not back to normal yet, and that I think there's a great deal of schooling, and it's not just in-school schooling where these computers and laptops come into their own. There are still after-school clubs being run virtually, that have to keep kids going whilst their parents are working, and keep them occupied and teach them some very much needed social skills, because they're not getting that in school anymore, but they're able to interact in that way. So don't give up just because you think the school's going back to school.
David, you start to see back some of the videos from the kids, haven't you, where talking about, and the parents talking about just what it means to them. And it's, you have to have a particularly tough bottom lip not to well up actually at some of those stories as to what difference that actually makes.
It's fantastic. And if if you think about how everybody's lives have changed, and how the world became a little bit darker in some respects from social contact, and the stuff that kids need at school. That's what they're learning. It's more than just maths and English. It's also it's that social interaction, and I think they've had a really rough year with it.
Shoplifting as well.
Hey,
it's shoplifting as well. That's all I learned.
Shoplifting as well. Well, I'm sure you learned all your best habits in school.
Not I played it. I played it in a drama class and never really lost it. Who thought you could make a career out of it?
You know, obviously I didn't get to go to a good old Christian school, but did you ever get to play anything significant in the nativity play?
No, and I'll tell you why. For a period of time, I pretended, because I was born in Kuwait, I pretended to be Islamic. So I got out of the Christian classes. When I realised I couldn't answer a single question, I went to a Protestant school. So I pretended I was then Catholic, so that I got out of. So I got out of that. So no, I didn't get invited to do any of that stuff.
Yeah, well, you know what? If we ever do an extended play, then I'm gonna get you a part in it. I think we need to make up for those lost experiences.
The Holy Spirit, because he gets around, doesn't he?
Only if I can be Judas. Enough of that. Let's talk later. Right, everybody. Have a great week.
Have a great one. Ta-ra. See you later.